2024 Mais Lecture, the Chancellor addressed, before she was the Chancellor, addressed the question of economic growth in an age of insecurity. She laid out a blueprint for creating sustained cycle of business growth and the challenges of the global economy. In an interview with the Financial Times shortly before last autumn's budget, the Chancellor insisted that she had the tenacity and determination to turn around an economy which has been hampered by low growth and high debt. Evidence of this tenacity can be seen in her confession at once of spending Valentine's Day watching Newsnight special about the lessons from the Swedish banking crisis. I think it shows real commitment to the job. Today, the Chancellor will speak about an active and strategic state. Following the speech, my colleague Professor Barbara Kazu, who's the Director of our Centre for Banking Research and also Deputy Dean of the school, will chair a short Q&A with the Chancellor. I'd like to if you'd like to share the conversation we're having today on social media, please use the hashtag #MaisLecture. After the lecture, we hope you stay from some refreshments outside. So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please join me in welcoming Rachel Reeves to deliver the 2026 Mais Lecture.
Thank you very much, Andre, for that introduction. And it's a privilege to be back at the Bayes Business School today. Mission, this government's mission, is to correct that. From me as Chancellor, it requires three things. It requires responsibility to steward our public finances. It requires fairness so that when difficult choices must be made, working people know that their interests are at the forefront of my mind. And it requires a plan to build prosperity, because our collective standard of living is determined not only by our success in keeping prices under control, but also by our ability to get incomes rising, expand opportunity, and build abundance where there is scarcity. We can only do that with sustained productivity-driven growth. My argument is that growth today relies on an active and strategic state, working in partnership with business, to build prosperity that is secure and resilient in a fast-changing world. The object is to turn around our medium-run productivity performance and build an investment-led growth model for the UK. That requires a break with the past, with the laissez-faire politics of the passive state, the fiction that a strong economy could be built on the success of just a few places, and with the instability and wrong-headed policy-making of recent governments. Since the summer of 2024, we've been doing things differently, through an active and a strategic state, delivering stability to create the strong foundations for businesses to plan and to invest, providing public investment to de-risk new opportunities, shape markets and crowd in private investment, and implementing reform to shape an economy that supports the creation of wealth, not its extraction. Finally, I want to set out three big choices, the areas which I have identified the greatest growth and opportunities for the UK in the decade to come, and then the actions that we are taking to grasp those opportunities. Given the conflict in Iran, with economic implications at home and around the world, let me begin with that global context. 2 years ago, in my first Mais Lecture, I described the new age of insecurity, marked by the long fallout from the 2008 financial crisis and the seismic events that followed. global pandemic, war within Europe's borders and now in the Middle East, energy crises and disruptions to global trade. These crises affirm the reality that globalisation, as we once knew it, is dead. When I said so in 2023, I was criticised in some quarters, but I don't think today many would deny it. Each crisis has reminded us that ours continues to be an interconnected world, in which a country's competitiveness, openness to trade and credibility on international financial markets remain critical. But that easy optimism about global economic integration has faded, with shocks in one part of the world transmitted swiftly along fragile global supply chains, impacting prices and living standards here at home. My conclusion was that we must build growth that is both secure and resilient. Growth is the condition for secure and rising incomes, the revenues to support our public services, and a strong state able to safeguard its people. But without security, growth is little more than a thought experiment, an abstraction which dissolves upon contact with the real world. That insight underpins a strategy that I call securonomics. This is not a protectionist agenda. It's not a defence of incumbents threatened by a truly dynamic market, or a retreat to a naive 20th century statism. Nor is it simply about having an insurance policy, leaving our economic model pretty much unreformed, but paying a greater premium in case of shocks. Rather, it is a necessary adaptation to the global economic context, which every country must navigate. A growth strategy which restores the delicate balance between flexibility and security for working people, attends to the strengths of our supply chains, and takes an active interest in where things are made and who makes them. In Iran, we are witnessing further symptoms of that age of insecurity, which are likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the months to come. But the actions this government has taken has put Britain in a more secure position than on the eve of the Ukraine conflict. Inflation is lower, and we entered this moment with lower borrowing than the G7 average and the path of greatest deficit reduction amongst G7 economies. In a dangerous world, we have invested in our national security, with the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. An additional £5.6 billion this year to upgrade our Typhoon fighter jets, launch new Navy frigates and build helicopters. And today we have announced that we are exploring a new mechanism with the Netherlands, Finland and other EU and NATO partners to collaborate on defence financing and procurement. The aim is to collaborate to strengthen our collective security and resilience by ramping up critical capacities and getting the most out of every pound that we spend on defence. And our energy security plan is taking effect. We've lifted the onshore wind ban, invested in offshore wind in the Celtic and North Sea, unlocked £90 billion in private investment in renewables, invested in a new era of nuclear power at Sizewell C and at Britain's first small modular reactors in Anglesey in Wales, and faced down opposition at every level to do so. And we're starting to see the results. The UK imported 17% less gas in 2025 than we did in 2021. Gas generation plays a reduced role in determining wholesale electricity prices. And our contracts for difference shield bill payers by smoothing price shocks for consumers. This week, the Energy Secretary announced further steps to strengthen energy security, including making plug-in solar panels available in the UK for the first time. And from next month, the energy price cap will be £117 on average lower, thanks to the action that I took at the budget. We are working with our partners to secure oil and gas and liquefied natural gas transit through the Strait of Hormuz. And it remains the case, the single best way to protect families and businesses from rising energy prices is a swift resolution to the conflict in the Middle East. We have intervened already to protect the most vulnerable households reliant on heating oil, and I remain in active contact with the Competition and Markets Authority to make sure that they have the necessary powers to crack down on any companies attempting to exploit this crisis for excessive profits, whether on road fuel, heating oil, or other essentials. I did not plan to deliver this speech in this context, but it affirms rather than challenges the philosophy that I outlined in opposition and which has guided me in government. In a more volatile world, there are always excuses to put off the hard work of reform. But we must focus on the causes as well as the symptoms of our vulnerabilities. So this is not a moment to prevaricate, not to retreat into comforting old orthodoxies, but to press ahead, to build secure, resilient growth, guided by an active and strategic state. This age of insecurity affects every country, every continent, every trading bloc. Each must adapt. But the task at hand is to build on our strengths, not just to mimic other countries. We are the world's second largest exporter of services, underscored by the ubiquity of our language, the historic strength of our institutions, and our openness to trade. We have world-class creative industries and strong manufacturing specialisms in pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and defence. We've got an entrepreneurial culture, vibrant capital markets in London and in other financial centres, universities that truly do lead the world, and immense potential in the industries of the future, in life science, energy, and artificial intelligence. And we are backing those key sectors through our modern industrial strategy. But there are obstacles too. In my previous Mais lecture, I diagnosed the root of Britain's economic problems. Underlying our living standards challenge, our public services challenge, and our fiscal challenge is our productivity challenge. Since the global financial crisis, the UK has experienced the sharpest slowdown in productivity growth in any G7 economy. The major reason for that is our anemic levels of investment. Investment, intangible and tangible, is the essential input, giving workers the best tools to do their jobs, discovering and applying new ideas, and building the infrastructure on which our whole economy relies. For most of the last 3 decades, the UK has sat right at the bottom of the G7 league table for combined public and private investment. For other economies, with other circumstances, raising domestic consumption may be the key ingredient for growth. But here, in Britain, the fundamental challenge is investment. And the central economic imperative of this government is to build for the United Kingdom an investment-led growth model. To do that, we are correcting 3 crucial failures of policy. Let me take each in turn. First was the persistence of an outmoded view, a doctrine of the passive state, holding that the best thing that a government could do was stand aside and let markets to their own devices, that the state had no role in identifying areas of potential comparative advantage, in de-risking bets on emerging industries, or in shaping and making markets. The result was an imbalanced economy, ill-equipped for technological change. Passivity did not even deliver a small state, as the political right imagined it would, but rather a highly centralised regulatory state, indifferent to the structure of the economy, lacking in strategic focus, and so easily swayed by any given interest group, many with legitimate cause, but which over time drove the steady accumulation of complex new regulatory barriers. The state's capacity for productive intervention diminished, but its capacity to obstruct was greatly enhanced. Second was a belief that growth could be built on a narrow geographic base, Now, everywhere I go in the UK, I see the talent, the vision and the ambition to be part of something. But I also see the barriers, the legacies of deindustrialisation, the uneven distribution of opportunity, high housing costs, problems exacerbated by poor public transport and a highly centralised political system, which together conspire to block the agglomeration effects that can attract and multiply investment. Today, what most distinguishes Britain from our closest peers is the relative underperformance of our major cities outside of London compared to their European counterparts. There are huge gains to be made if we can only close that gap. If we back Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds to match and overtake Stuttgart, Turin and Lyon. And third, there were the chaotic wrong turns taken after 2010, which further suppressed investment. Austerity choked off demand, just when historically low interest rates offered a priceless opportunity to invest. Brexit created profound uncertainty, raised new barriers to trade, and leaves Britain facing an additional danger today. The risk that we find ourselves stranded between powerful trading blocs as globalisation retreats. Meanwhile, our unstable stop-go cycle of capital investment, what I called the new British disease, drove up infrastructure costs and inhibited investment. The disastrous mini-budget represented a final doomed fanatical attempt at eking a sugar rush out of a broken economic model. Now, it might feel daunting, but in this changing world, Britain is not powerless. We can shape our own future. Our method is securonomics. That is built on one crucial idea, that an active and strategic state, working with business, can build and secure resilient growth, stepping up its role in expanding the supply side of the economy, making conscious and deliberate choices about the sectors in which we pursue and in the capabilities that we must protect or grow. An approach embodied in our modern industrial strategy. The active and strategic state is guided by three priorities: stability, investment, and reform. Stability is a basic precondition for secure family finances, business confidence, and business investment. And so, in my first two budgets, I raised taxes to restore stability in the face of an inherited £22 billion black hole in the public finances, to provide a necessary cash injection for our schools and hospitals on the brink, and to give us the buffer to withstand shocks. Now, I know that these choices were not universally popular, and they do have their costs. But I don't believe that we would be in a stronger place today if we had entered this latest shock with higher inflation, higher interest rates, and higher borrowing, or with collapsing public services. I made those choices because they were necessary. I made those choices because they were fair. Because while it's right that we should all contribute, it is also right that those with the broadest shoulders pay the most, especially in an economy where, over time, the returns on what some people own have frequently outstripped the wages others earn. And I made those choices too to support the work of economic reform, taxing wealth more, to shift the incentives within our tax system towards rewarding work, enterprise and investment, rather than the passive accumulation of wealth. We have paired stability with public investment. In my first budget, I changed the fiscal rules that we inherited so that government counts the financial benefits of investment and not just the costs, creating a framework through which I could increase public investment by more than £120 billion over the course of this Parliament, investing in housing, in data, in energy, in road and in rail, the essential building blocks of growth, and in targeted investments in our industrial strategy sectors, unlocking private capital in partnership with business through UK export finance and our new National Wealth Fund. Alongside stability, Alongside investment, an active and strategic state must advance reform. The status quo we inherited offered neither a truly competitive market economy nor an economy that gives a fair deal to working people. An investment-led growth model depends on us changing that, with a supply-side social democracy, to drive investment and dynamism, redress the distortive concentrations and inequalities of power that shield incumbents from market competition, take on artificial scarcities in land, labour, capital and in energy, and shift the balance of market power towards workers, consumers, bill payers and renters. That includes adopting a new attitude to regulation. The UK has a world-class competition regime, headed by our empowered independent Competition and Markets Authority. And I am not a believer in deregulation as ideology. But where the evidence tells me that regulation is falling behind economic change, that regulatory frameworks are inhibiting competition, or when arbitrary complexity and duplication are getting in the way of productive investment, then I am a believer in regulatory innovation, regulatory rationalisation, and levelling the playing field. The object of reform is to shape an economy that rewards productive enterprise and investment, not the accumulation of economic rents. Let me set out what that means in 4 areas: land, energy, capital and labour. First, land. We inherited a system of land use planning that was a direct obstacle to investment, effectively rationing homes and infrastructure and ramping up the costs of development. That approach has priced young people out of the housing market and hemmed in our most dynamic cities. 2 years ago, I promised that we would do what other governments have lacked the will to do and grasp the nettle of planning reform. We have done so, reintroducing and raising mandatory housing targets, opening grey belt land to development, stopping local planning committees from blocking growth, easing consultation requirements on major infrastructure. And there is much more to come. Second, energy. We inherited a system in the UK where businesses were paying some of the highest energy bills in Europe. The last government failed to invest in clean, homegrown power and failed to reform an outdated system. The action we are taking on renewables, on nuclear, on reforming the grid is changing that. We will legislate to implement the Finkelton Review, to build nuclear faster. And for business, we are expanding the supercharger discount from this April and launching our British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme from next year. And there is much more to come. Third, capital. We inherited a capital system marked both by a failure to supply the capital to invest in growing businesses and a failure to cater to domestic and international investors by nurturing investable propositions here in Britain. So we are opening access to capital through my Leeds reforms and by redirecting capital stuck in pension funds and in ISAs. And we are lifting the barriers that block startups and scale-ups from competing with incumbents for investment. Through our regulatory action plan, our reformed listing rules and a tax incentive overhaul. And there is much more to come. Fourth, our labour market. We inherited an economy that disincentivised employers from investing in capital, facilitating a low-wage, low-investment equilibrium. It made it riskier for workers to move jobs, yielding significant skills mismatches. And we made it harder for too many people to work at all. Our Employment Rights Act is about dignity, security and fairness for working people, creating a labour market with genuine two-way flexibility. And it is about rebalancing the incentives on employers, not to fire and rehire, but to retain and train. Work should always pay. And so we have increased the national living wage and reformed universal credit. But there's more to do. Youth unemployment of over 16% is far too high. and we will not leave a generation to languish without prospects. So we've made a record investment in training and in apprenticeships, launched our youth guarantee and announced a new £3,000 youth jobs grant. And as we await the report of the Milburn Review this summer, there is more to come. By the end of this Parliament, we must have built a welfare system materially different from the one that we inherited, to support people, to find work and to thrive in work. A secure and resilient economy cannot permit insecurity and in-work poverty. A high-skill economy cannot afford to neglect the health and education of its people. And a dynamic economy cannot tolerate deep inequalities of opportunity. We inherited an economy marked by those injustices and those inefficiencies. And we're changing it, strengthening human capital and restoring social justice. Because of my tax choices, made in my first budget, last June, I could allocate an additional £50 billion per year to our public services by the end of the spending review period. We're beginning to see the results. NHS waiting lists at their lowest level in 3 years. More than 500,000 kids and their parents benefiting from 30 hours of free childcare. And from next month, the 2-child limit will be gone for good, lifting almost 500,000 children out of poverty. Much done, much more to do. That is our plan: stability, investment and reform. I won't pretend that the last 18 months haven't been without their challenges. There have been arguments that we had won on principle before the election about fiscal responsibility, growth and careful prioritisation, which I have found must be fought and won over and over again to persuade people in practice. And I have experienced a government that justified impatience for change, and at the same time the limits of what can be done and controlled from the centre. When it is businesses, workers, local leaders who innovate, create jobs and drive change. But I've also seen, close up, the real appetite in the private sector, in the public sector, in local government for real change. And we have made progress, with the fastest growth of any European G7 economy across 2025. But we need to go much further. We are in this for the long haul. Embracing an active and strategic state means accepting government's responsibility for influencing the shape and the trajectory of future growth. So I am making 3 big choices on the greatest growth opportunities for Britain in the decade to come. The areas in which an outsized difference can be made by concerted government action. My first big choice is a direct response to the failures of the past. To go for growth not just in a few parts of Britain, but to give Britain's regions the chance to push ahead and shape their own destinies. That is about fairness, about being a country where every citizen can achieve, succeed and contribute to our national prosperity, no matter what their parents do, where they grow up, or where they choose to settle down. But it's also an economic imperative. In an unbalanced Britain, we all lose out. Our most dynamic areas constrained with high housing costs, while too many parts of Britain go with their potential untapped, lacking reliable transport connections, denied the agglomeration benefits that come with them, and struggling in turn to attract investment. I know that people are sceptical. They feel that they've heard it all before and had little to show for it. I've been a Leeds MP for 16 years. I get it. For decades, politicians have paid lip service to regional potential, making and then unmaking new institutions, new elected posts, new agencies, announcing new infrastructure projects with great fanfare. But they've lacked the will to give regional leaders the means to shape the destiny of their places and their people. We are doing things differently. First, by rooting our plans firmly in the realities of economic geography. I want every part of Britain to do well. A few cities shouldn't have the monopoly on good work, the wealth that comes with it, or the pride in their local place. all 4 nations and every region has something to contribute, and a claim to a fair share in UK-wide prosperity. Each part of Britain can carve out its own niche in industries crucial to the UK's prosperity and security, drawing on the skills of their workforce, their existing industrial strengths, and the natural assets on which they are built. That's why we stepped in, to assure a future for shipbuilding in Belfast, car manufacturing in the West Midlands, and steel at Port Talbot and in Scunthorpe. And the Business Secretary will publish the government's steel strategy on Thursday to secure a long-term future for British-made steel. That is why our National Wealth Fund is investing in power in Orkney, in critical minerals in Cornwall, and in building a global clean energy supercluster in the north, spanning Northumberland, Teesside and Humberside. It is why we are investing too in the social infrastructure that binds our communities, to turn the tide on neighbourhood decline through our Pride in Place programme, and in the places that drive local prosperity through our Growth Mission Fund. We must be clear-eyed, however, about where the biggest growth rewards lie in today's world. In a modern, service-based economy, dense, interconnected city regions are the fundamental geographic unit for attracting investment, stoking innovation, and sustained economic success. Too often in political debate, the concerns about political geography distract from the realities of economic geography, feeding the dangerous misconception that we must choose between our towns and our cities. I want brilliant, dedicated people in Wakefield, in Rochdale and Barnsley to succeed. They should not have to uproot themselves to do so. There is no reason why they cannot live close to home, a short commute from a good job, if we invest in the tram and the rail and the train infrastructures, and crowding new investment, new opportunities, new wealth, diffusing outwards from growing cities into their surrounding towns. There is another convenient political misconception that must be taken head on. That is that it is a zero-sum game, where opportunity, wealth and investment for one part of the country means another area must miss out. An overheating southeast and an underperforming north are 2 sides of the same coin, and we are all poorer for it. So we are backing London, our services superpower, with arrangements to strengthen and unlock housing development in the capital. And those details will be confirmed in the coming days. And to free our most dynamic cities to expand and raise up whole new communities. This week, we will launch the consultation on our next generation of new towns. But at the centre of our plan for regional growth are 2 critical growth corridors, already home to world-leading research institutions and dynamic firms. First, we are backing the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor to unleash the potential of our science and technology powerhouses and the towns and cities between them, investing £2.5 billion in East-West Rail, fast-tracking new reservoirs in Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire, backing the expansion of Luton Airport and providing over £500 million for transport in Oxford, housing in Cambridge and in a new Cambridge Innovation Hub. We have already announced a consultation on a development corporation for Greater Cambridge, and I can today announce that we will consult on a development corporation for Greater Oxford too. I am doubling the government's initial £400 million commitment in Cambridge, making over £800 million available for upfront land acquisition and infrastructure to support these cities to grow. In both corridors, I want to see deals done quickly. But where landowners are intransigent or insist on unreasonable demands, we are ready to acquire land using compulsory powers, either directly or by standing by local leaders. And I have asked the Housing Secretary to crack on with the work needed to deploy those powers in parallel, so no time is wasted. That's a crucial pillar in our plan for investment and growth. But alone it is not sufficient. The north of England has waited for far too long for a government that matches warm words with concerted ambition. we can bring the productivity of the city regions of Northern England just to the national average. And if we do that, the prize on offer is an economy £40 billion bigger. To make that change, we are investing in the Northern Growth Corridor, home to 9 million people, spanning Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds, Sheffield and York, to strengthen Liverpool's position as a hub for life sciences, digital and tech. Make Leeds' expanded Northern Square Mile a destination for global financial services. Establish South Yorkshire as a modern industrial heartland in manufacturing and defence. And make Manchester a global growth cluster in life sciences, advanced manufacturing and digital technologies, including through the government's new Manchester Digital Campus, which I can confirm today is going ahead, moving power and people outside of London. These are commitments backed with real capital and supported by my decision to rewrite the Treasury's investment rules so that all towns and cities get a fair hearing. In July, I announced the biggest ever investment by a British government in transport links within our city regions. £15.6 billion for new trams, new train stations and new bus routes. Better linking Bury with Manchester, Washington with Newcastle and Sunderland, and Rotherham with Sheffield. And better connecting those cities with the Transpennine route upgrade. And our commitment to Northern Powerhouse Rail, the spine of the Northern Growth Corridor. Our new approach means genuine partnership with mayors and local leaders. But spending differently at the centre is not enough. It is no coincidence that Britain is one of the most politically centralised of advanced democracies and one of the most geographically unequal too. While local leaders are asked to plan for the long term, to be accountable for regional outcomes, the fiscal reward for local economic success flows straight to the Exchequer. We need to change that, to liberate our regions from stifling Whitehall orthodoxies. So I'm announcing today an innovative approach to public financing to address viability gaps that hold back growth projects in our cities. The new city investment funds will use an additional £2.3 billion of funding, focused on major city regions in the North and in the West Midlands, giving established regional leaders control over long-term, self-sustaining capital. Theirs to generate returns from, theirs to invest, backed by a commitment to business rates retention. But we must go further. I can tell you today that I have asked my officials to work with mayors and businesses to develop a roadmap for future fiscal devolution to be published at this year's budget. This will set out plans to give regional leaders control of a share of some national taxes, which have for too long been allocated by central government. They will look at income tax alongside other taxes, with reforms initially targeted at those places that have the greatest capacity to deliver them and the greatest potential to benefit. Now, this is not about new taxes, and it's not about higher tax rates. I will not ask taxpayers to pay more. Reforms will be fiscally neutral, focused on sharing and retaining a portion of existing revenues, with the proceeds of growth benefiting the places that generated that growth, while managing volatile receipts for both local areas and the Exchequer. These reforms will represent a permanent transfer of power and resources, not another exercise in local ambition frustrated by central government control, with taxpayers able to see what is being delivered with their money and to hold local leaders to account for the results. What I am describing is a genuine break with the past, a generational opportunity for Britain's regions to make their own future. That brings me to my second big choice. Every day, our world's horizons are extended a little bit further by innovators, creators and entrepreneurs. I want the builders of tomorrow's world to build that world here. The UK is in a position of real strength, with world-leading universities, deep research capability from Edinburgh to the west of England, backed by record R&D investment strategically targeted at frontier technologies, and one of the most vibrant AI startup ecosystems anywhere outside the United States. Every major AI lab is either establishing or expanding here in the UK. UK AI startups raised £6 billion in venture capital last year, and just 3 months into 2026, they've already raised more than half of that figure again. AI is the defining technology of our era. Not only a general purpose technology with the potential to transform productivity across the entire economy, but also an invention in the very method of invention, rewriting the rules of innovation and idea creation. Breakthrough technologies have always emerged where innovative businesses and entrepreneurial government have worked together. From the internet to semiconductors to biotechnology. That principle of partnership between private enterprise and an active strategic state must guide us today to ensure the growth and productivity gains from new technology are realised in the UK to the benefit of working people. I understand people's anxieties about the implication of these technologies. But the choice is this. We can bury our heads in the sand and leave it to other countries, whose values may differ from ours, to shape and to own this technology. We can leave it to the market alone and let the balance of risk and reward be determined by a super wealthy few. Or we can chart our own path, where an active and strategic state protects British interests through AI sovereignty, with absolute clarity about where growth will come from and who will benefit, harnessing and shaping new technology in our common interest. I want to be absolutely clear about what our strategy is. First, to build sufficient compute to protect our interests and avoid excessive dependencies on others. Second, to establish our foothold and compete fiercely in the areas where we have real strengths, such as AI applications, AI chip designs, cybersecurity. Third, to maximise the value added by AI to the wider economy and the public sector through accelerated adoption. And fourth, and most importantly, to equip working people with the tools that they need to maximise the rewards and minimise the risks. So first on compute. Here, our focus has been to ensure that the UK has sufficient data centre capacity to protect sensitive data, ensure resilience from global shocks, and support domestic adoption. But data centres are not an end in themselves. What matters more is that we identify and pursue those parts of the supply chain where we can win the global race, marrying a clear-eyed assessment of our competitive advantage with precise analysis of where sovereign capabilities can give us, in Britain, maximum leverage. So second, competing where we can win. The object is a competitive world, is that we can't own the whole stack, any more than we could isolate ourselves from global technological advances. But my starting point is that as AI becomes fundamental to our economies, a thriving domestic AI sector is a critical part of our national resilience. And so we won't build a sovereign wall to shelter behind, but rather a sovereign edge, backing strategic national champions and making sure that internationally competitive companies start, scale, and stay here in Britain. We should already be proud of our record. We are the birthplace of businesses including DeepMind, Wave, and Arm. Deep tech businesses like these are how we'll establish a critical foothold in the AI value chain, protecting British interests by ensuring that British companies are at the frontier of global AI development. For that, Britain must be the place where you can employ the best talent, access the right finance, and be supported by cutting-edge regulation. We have a world-leading talent regime, with competitive visas and enterprise management incentives. And we will back workers who want to move firms by placing clear limits on the use of non-compete clauses which inhibit innovation and dynamism. On capital, we reformed the mandate of the British Business Bank and put £5 billion behind British startups. We will launch our sovereign AI unit next month with a £500 million commitment for starting and scaling AI businesses in Britain. And we're making government the first customer for innovative technologies through our procurement rules. We want public procurement to become a launchpad for scale-ups, not a check for global incumbents. We're exploring new ways to procure innovative solutions to priority problems in areas like defence and health. And we will not be agnostic about where things are made and who makes them. Instead, we will stand behind British businesses and British bidders, providing guidance on how national security exemptions should be applied in critical sectors, including in AI. And we are using procurement to give us a head start on quantum computing. Through our advanced commitment, we have pledged to procure up to £1 billion of quantum computers from the first UK companies to successfully make them at commercial scale, firing the starting gun on a global race and making sure that the UK is at the front of the pack. And if regulation is to keep pace with technological change and support AI innovation, then we can't just tweak the rules, but think about regulation in whole new ways. And so the Business Secretary will soon legislate for our new growth labs, modelling a bold new approach to regulation, with the power to make rapid temporary amendments to regulation to safety test and prove application of new tech. So here is my message to every entrepreneur looking to build a new AI product. Come to the UK. We will back your experiment to push the bounds of possibility and to get your product, your creation off the ground. The third pillar of our AI strategy is adoption. We want Britain to achieve the fastest rate of AI adoption of any country in the G7. The AI productivity dividend is how our leading sectors will stay ahead of their competitors. And it's how small and medium and large businesses will grow. So we're backing AI adoption through our AI for Science strategy and our funding for adoption in AI growth zones, including in North Wales and in Lanarkshire. And we are applying AI in the public sector too, supporting diagnostics in healthcare, creating personalised teaching plans for our young people, and reducing admin for care workers so they can spend more time with their patients. Later this year, I will convene business leaders for an AI adoption summit, bringing together leading tech firms with companies ready to adopt and scale AI to grow their own businesses. And fourth, on jobs. People want good jobs that pay well. And they want the same for the next generation too. I know people are worried about technological change and that how those changes may threaten those things that matter. I understand that. So let me say this. Every part of our strategy on AI is aimed at ensuring that our people have a share in the prosperity that AI can create through new and better jobs, through better, more personalised public services. To achieve that, we must equip people with the skills that are right for them and across the whole of Britain to navigate and succeed in this transition. Whether they work in a job that will be changed by technology, or if they work in a job that's created by new technology, or whether they run a small business and want the benefits of reduced paperwork, streamlined accounting, or smarter marketing. That's why we've announced our ambition to upskill as many as 10 million workers through our AI Skills Boost campaign, committing £27 million to help employers fill or create tech jobs. And it's why we've launched AI scholarships at our universities. And I can today announce that, building on the example of the AI Security Institute, we are setting up a new AI Economics Institute. That institute will draw on world-leading expertise to closely monitor the impact of AI on our productivity and on our labour markets. That institute will support us, as our economy changes, to act swiftly and appropriately to make sure that working people are made better off, not losing out from this transition. There will be bumps in the road as we navigate these changes, but leadership is not waiting for perfect certainty. It's about facing the risks openly, building the right safeguards, and moving forwards with confidence. With the technologies of the future invented, built, and deployed here in Britain, and working people across our country reaping the benefits. Let me turn now to the final of my big choices. In this age of insecurity, the economic, political, and military strength of our country will rest on strategic alliances. Fleet-footed and pragmatic, where our priorities align around particular issues, and building the deepest partnerships where common interests, common values, and economic gravity align. Our fate as a country is inescapably bound with that of Europe. That is true because of our shared history and our shared values, the friendships and common culture that extend across borders and endure over time. And it is true because of our common interests on trade, on economic security, and our collective security against Russian aggression. We must continue to work together, given the ever greater premium on solidarity and collective effort in our defence relationship. I welcome the steps that we've taken so far, and we will look carefully at any option to allow our participation in the EU's efforts to make a £90 billion loan to Ukraine. Economic resilience in an uncertain world cannot be about turning inwards. Resilience comes from the diversity as well as the proximity of our supply chains and the common values which support our trading relationships. This government is already making significant progress on our relationship with the European Union, on agri-food, electricity, emissions trading, and Erasmus. But Brexit did deep damage. Recent independent studies indicate its GDP impact could be as much as 8%. It has meant higher costs for businesses and therefore higher costs in our shops. It's meant shrinking markets for UK exporters and our strategic industries exposed as protectionist barriers rise worldwide. Deals with India, the United States and other allies are extremely welcome and beneficial. But no trade deal with any individual nation can outweigh the importance of our relationship to a bloc with which we share a land border, with which our supply chains are closely intertwined, and that accounts for almost half of our trade. There is also a strategic imperative for deeper integration between the UK and the EU in our shared need for greater economic resilience. So my choice, the choice of this government, is not to turn back the clock, but to look forwards to a new and stable future relationship. As the Prime Minister has said, where it is in our national interest to align with EU regulation, we should be prepared to do so, including in further areas of the single market. The principles we apply when we judge our national interest are crucial. So let me tell you exactly what they are. First, that a decision to align should mean higher growth and investment, more jobs and consumer benefits for the long term. Second, that the future direction of policy should be sufficiently stable and compatible in terms of values and objectives. And third, that the UK's economic and national security and resilience should be preserved or enhanced. When those principles are satisfied, alignment should be forward-looking and durable, providing the certainty that businesses on both sides need to invest and grow. Now, there are areas in which regulatory autonomy may be necessary for sectors with unique characteristics or strategic importance for the UK. But that should be the exception, not the norm. To get this right, we must work more closely with businesses, both here and across Europe. But when the economic gains exceed the costs, the trade-off is worth making. The prize is considerable. Costs of doing business reduced for UK and EU companies. New opportunities to export to each other's markets. New experience for travel, for work and study for our young people. Scale-ups, gaining access to deeper pools of capital and talent. Greater choice for consumers, both in the UK and the EU, helping to bring down prices and inflation. A more resilient, more efficient energy system across Europe, and a deeper, more integrated defence industrial base among close allies to repel common threats. All this within a stable economic framework that allows us to keep building the relationship without constant renegotiation of the basic terms. And let me say this directly to our friends and allies in Europe. This government believes that a deeper relationship is in the interest of the whole of Europe. We bring real strengths to that partnership. Our science base, our deep and liquid capital markets, our capabilities in defence and security, our research institutions and our universities. These can be sources of collective European strength. The alternative is more costly and less secure. Both the UK and the EU are taking measures to improve security and resilience in key sectors. We both face the same challenges, such as overcapacity and higher tariffs, which are distorting global markets. If we are to enhance the competitiveness of European industry in the face of global competition, we must work together, remove trade barriers between us, and avoid collateral harm between trusted partners. It is in Britain's and in Europe's collective interest to respond to global challenges as a partnership, strengthening our global competitive advantage. And the truth is this: Britain's future prosperity will not be built in isolation, but through partnerships with those who share our interests, share our values, and share our ambitions. And no partnership is more important than that between the UK and our European neighbours. This will require us to make and win the political argument. And believe me, I'm up for it, because I believe absolutely that closer alignment is the right course for our country. A course chosen as a sovereign nation, a course chosen in our national interest. 2 years ago, in this lecture hall, I said that despite the challenges, I was an optimist about our ability to face them. And despite further challenges that have come our way, I remain an optimist. An optimist about the capacity of an active and strategic state to drive investment and to drive growth. An optimism about the dynamism and the enterprise of British business. An optimist about the talent, commitment and ingenuity of working people in every part of our United Kingdom. Our mission: to unlock that talent, that commitment, that ingenuity. To pair economic success with security and social justice. No one ever said it would be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. And while I have heard plenty of criticisms of this government's policies, what I have yet to hear is a credible or compelling alternative plan. Our method, the active and strategic state, to build an investment-led growth model for Britain. And our plan, stability, investment and reform, to make Britain the place where the industries of the future are created, where the technologies of the future are developed, and where the jobs of the future are secured. All built on the foundation of economic security. That is our mission, our plan and our method. From investment, growth. From growth, national renewal. Thank you very much. Thank you love. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Thank you very much, Chancellor, for this inspiring and forward-looking speech. I have really enjoyed the enthusiasm and the ability to look beyond the challenges that we face at the moment. I am also very grateful to you to accept our invite, and it's very nice to have you here again. And with this, I want to open a short Q&A with our audience. So we have a few questions, and the first one, I want to invite one of our alumni from the Executive MBA 2025, and here's Sheila.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the slides shared. My question is on productivity and connects some of the points mentioned. UK's productivity has fallen behind the one of other G7 countries. And at the same time, UK's science and technology strategy, which includes a lot of AI, as you also explained, is actually one of the most comprehensive in Europe, if not worldwide. How can we harness the latter to solve the productivity problem? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I believe that at its roots, our poor productivity performance is because of our poor investment performance over many decades, because it's the capital stock that is going to impact how productive you can be. And if you haven't invested in that over time, it is not there to give workers the tools that they need to be productive in the workplace. And for the last 30 years, we've been at the bottom or close to the bottom of the G7 league table of public and private investment as a share of GDP. And that is why I'm really clear that a growth model for Britain has to be an investment-led model of growth, because it's an investment that leads to productivity, and productivity that delivers growth and the rising living standards and the better public services that bring. Now, we're already beginning to turn that around. In the first 18 months of this government, we were in the top half of the G7 league table with investment as a share of GDP. We haven't been in that place for an awfully long time, but we have to keep that momentum going, unlock private investment, pair it with public investment through the National Wealth Fund, through the British Business Bank. But you're absolutely right that AI, innovation, these new technologies have got to be a driving force for growth. It's why in the spending review last year, I invested a record amount in R&D because that is the building blocks of the future investments and the future productivity growth that we need to see. But all of these things have to be sustained. A stop-go policy of investment and then austerity is not going to work. We have to sustain the public and private investment, give confidence to businesses to invest, but pair it as well with the public investment that I have unlocked, this government have unlocked, by counting the benefits of investment, not just the costs for the first time.
Thank you. Our second question is from a colleague here at Base Business School, Professor Anil Kaswani.
Hello, Chancellor. Yesterday, the Chancellor of the University of Cambridge said the student loan system is broken. What are you going to do to fix it?
Well, thank you very much for that question. When we came into government, an awful lot was broken. We had NHS waiting lists of close to 8 million. We had a prison service that was full to bursting point. We had a special educational needs system in our schools, which was not properly funded and was not delivering. I mean, I could go on. We had loads of projects that weren't properly funded, and we had a defence budget that did not meet the needs that we faced in an increasingly uncertain world. So yes, the student loan system is broken, but if we try to fix everything straight away, everything will fall over. Because we also have precarious public finances, and that has also been thrown into stark relief the last few weeks since the conflict in the Middle East erupted. So we are reintroducing the maintenance grant for the poorest students going to universities. We are also investing heavily in further education and apprenticeship, because the majority of young people don't go to university. And actually, when I give those statistics about young people not in education, employment and training, they don't tend to be the graduates. They tend to be the kids that don't go to university. The majority of kids who I went to school with, the majority of kids in my constituency who don't get the chance to go to university. So yes, the student loan system is broken, but what's more broken is the fact that we have got 1 in 6 kids not in education, employment or training. So yes, we want to fix it. Yes, we want to make improvements, but is it front of the queue? No, it's not. Because we've got to get those hospital waiting lists down. We've got to lift kids out of poverty so they get the chance in the first place, and we've got to uplift our defence spending. And politics is about priorities. I'm not denying that there's a problem. I'm not blind to that. But what I do say is there has to be some patience. We can't fix everything straight away. And if you say to me, you shouldn't have done child poverty and you should have reformed the student loan system, I just strongly disagree with that.
Thank you. Our third question is from Irene Graham, who's the CEO of the Scale Up Institute.
Good afternoon, Chancellor, and thank you for being consistent in doubling down on regional innovation and regional investment. I mean, you know, Scale Up economy, 44,000 businesses, 2.3 trillion are across the UK. And those in the industrial sectors, quantum AI, 8 in 10 of them sit outside London and the South East, so Northern Corridor, Supercluster, all very important. And when I visit the scale-ups around the country, those in quantum and others, one of their biggest challenges is getting that private sector scale-up capital, the patient capital, and particularly that pension fund institutional money. So with your commitments today, what more are you hoping for from the private sector investors? Pension fund investors, you kind of alluded to it, so I want to go a bit more into that.
Thanks very much for your question, Irene. So, as with most things, there's got to be a partnership and government has got a role to play. Now, some people say, you know, government just get out of the way and market forces will deliver. Well, in which case, we would have our startup and our scale-up businesses properly funded because they are delivering amazing returns, and yet it's not happening. So we've put £5 billion into the British Business Bank to invest in scale-ups, and crucially, scale-ups in all parts of the country. And from people from different backgrounds. So the Invest in Women Task Force is really important to me, and we've put money directly into that, the fund to support women startups, and also geographically diverse startups, because good ideas are not the monopoly of one place, and yet the vast majority of funding goes to startups that come out of London and the South East, and startups led by men, and you're missing out on huge opportunities. But we are also, as you say, reforming how our pension system works. Now, some of this draws on what the previous government did, who, through their Mansion House agreement, got a commitment to invest in private assets, but that agreement didn't include anything specific around UK assets. And so what myself and Torsten, the pensions minister, have managed to achieve is a higher allocation into private assets. That's both infrastructure and venture. And of that, half of which at least has to be in UK private assets. And that is exactly to deal with the challenge that you speak to, that the scale-ups are not getting that investment. But it's not just about that target, it's also about consolidation in the pensions industry, both the local government scheme, pension scheme, which we have more control over, and private pensions, because they have not been delivering either for scale-up businesses or for their savers as well. And so consolidation, and also the Mansion House Accord and the Sterling 20 to make those commitments about investing in private markets. The other thing I would say, though, is that public markets also matter, and that's why we're making reforms to ISAs. So from next April, there will be a £12,000 limit of what you can put in a cash ISA, unless you're over 65, and the residual, if you're able to save 20,000 a year, has to be in stocks and shares ISA. And that as well is about reinvigorating our public markets. London Stock Exchange has had a good year or so, but we want to see that continue. That's why we've also done things like getting rid of stamp duty on shares for the first 3 years after you list in the UK, to make the UK a more attractive place for businesses to stay. So that's why I talk about that journey from start-up to scale-up to staying in Britain.
Thank you. We are going to turn to some questions from the media now. We have Sam Fleming from the Financial Times.
Thanks very much, Sam from the FT. Good afternoon. Two questions, if I could. The first one is on fiscal policy. We've seen greater volatility in gilt yields recently in the wake of the oil shock, and we referred to that just now, which partly reflects the view the UK is more fiscally vulnerable than some of its counterparts. Do you stand you had expressed in Davos in January that the UK has done enough to avoid the need for any further tax increases, that it can withstand further shocks without need for further fiscal action? The second question was on the European Union side. You said made it very clear you want to see closer ties. Can I be clear? Do the red lines that Labour has set out still fully apply? Because this will clearly severely limit the opportunity for greater alignment, given Brussels' reluctance to accept cherry picking when it comes to the single market. It's made it clear that the UK can't have enhanced access to the EU without accepting greater obligations, for example, on financial contributions and also potentially on labour mobility. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, on government borrowing costs, I set out in the spring statement, which is the most up-to-date numbers from the independent forecaster, that shows even compared to the budget last year, we were spending £3 billion less on interest payments next year because we had managed to bring down government borrowing costs and indeed bring down borrowing costs for everyone in the country with 6 interest rate cuts in my first 18 months as Chancellor. In addition, for the first time since 2019, our budget deficit was less than 5% of GDP. It fell from, I think, 5.3 to 4.2% in a year, and then is expected to fall in every year of the forecast. And in fact, the IMF have confirmed that we've got the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation of any G7 economy, and we're meeting the fiscal rules with more headroom than the doubling that I managed to achieve in the autumn budget against both the stability rule and the investment rule. Now, it is absolutely the case that in the last 3 weeks, borrowing costs have increased, not just for the UK, but for countries around the world. And, you know, I am mindful of the impact that that will have, not just on the government finances, but on family finances and business finances as well. But I would say that we are in a much stronger position than we were in 18 months ago to withstand something like this. 18 months ago, we had a budget deficit of more than 5% of GDP. There had not been a spending review for years, and so the numbers just didn't add up. And there was a black hole in the public finances in the first year, whereas the last government, 3 months into the financial year, had spent the reserve 4 times over. We didn't use all of our reserve last year, and that shows the better fiscal management of this government compared to the last. I also recognise that one of the things that markets look at is inflation in different countries. But inflation as well is on a downward path in the UK because of the decisions that I took in the budget. So I am confident that we have got our country into a much better place. But anybody who thinks that this is the moment to change course, I just say to them that be very careful about what you are doing and what you are advocating, because we are in a stronger position now because of the fiscal rules, because of the fiscal prudence, which means when a shock comes along, we're better placed to navigate it than we would have been otherwise. And so while people say that I don't agree with all of my decisions, I don't see anyone saying that they have a better plan for managing the economy, managing the public finances and putting us back on a stable footing. In terms of your question about Europe, we will not be rejoining the single market, the customs union, or bringing back free movement of labour. We were very clear about that in our manifesto, and as with our fiscal rules, which we committed to in the manifesto, we're not going to be breaking our commitments on this either. But if you look at the negotiations we had with the EU last year on SPS, on emissions trading, on electricity trading, it is clear that we have managed to secure for Britain a bespoke deal, and we want to build on that deal, and that is exactly what we're doing. Thanks, Sam.
Then we have Philip Aldrich from Bloomberg.
Yes, thanks, Chancellor. You mentioned that you have great pride in the fact that you're Chancellor overseeing the biggest increase in defence spending in a long time. This deal, this procurement deal announced today, but there is a target, an ambition of 3% of GDP in this Parliament, and I wondered if, obviously, defence being extraordinarily urgent at the moment, I wondered if you've got any way of explaining how you're going to get this extra 14 billion potentially needed to get there. Will it be creative financing, spending cuts, that kind of thing? And on closer EU alignment, do you have any idea of the timescale for or the stepping stones for this progress towards closer alignment with the EU?
First of all, just on the first part of your question, Phil, if you don't mind, I would just correct you, because the commitment that both Labour and Conservative made at the last election was to get to 2.5% in this Parliament, and the commitment around 3% was for the next Parliament. Now, the Conservatives said they would get to 2.5% by the end of this Parliament. We are going to get there by April next year. And a commitment to 3% is for the next Parliament. No, it wasn't. It's for the next Parliament, Phil. And we will achieve that. But already we have a fully funded plan to uplift defence spending in this Parliament by cutting overseas development assistance, and that is the right thing to do in the world we live today, where hard power is increasingly important. Then on the second part, and today I've just announced that along with Finland and the Netherlands, we are committing to explore joint procurement, stockpiling, and also lending facilities to help countries uplift their defence spending and also get better value for money. And we're in discussion with other EU and NATO countries about joining that group. That's something I've been working on over the last few months with finance ministers and defence ministries across Europe and across NATO, and something that I believe will lead to better value for money for defence spending, as well as more financial power for defence spending and also for the defence industry to raise finance as well. In terms of progress on the EU relationship, we've already made good progress. We are back in Erasmus, which is great for young people who want to have those opportunities to study overseas. But also we have made agreements on SPS, on electricity and energy trading, and we're looking forward to bring forward a ambitious youth mobility scheme. The things I spoke about today are building on that, and I think you also heard in my speech me directly appealing to European countries, EU countries as well, that this is in our mutual interest in the world that we live in today, whether it's economic security or national security. Our futures are intertwined, and closer alignment and closer trading will be benefit to all of our countries.
Thank you. Ritika Gupta from CNBC.
Good afternoon, Chancellor. Really good to hear from CNBC. I know you discussed the state of public finances and borrowing costs despite the Middle East war, but just to push on that a little bit, because of course we have seen gilt yields rise significantly, and to what extent could these high borrowing costs force you into either hiking taxes, spending cuts, or even more borrowing? And secondly, on the EU single market access, though you ruled out rejoining the What is the length of your ambition here when it comes to the EU single market? Are there any specific access to markets that you're targeting? Because a lot of the economists that I've spoken to have said that the ambition so far, whether it is the agricultural deal or the youth mobility scheme, it's not going to translate into sufficient growth that the UK needs.
Well, on the first part of the question as well, I set out in my first budget the fiscal rules that this government will adhere to. And every fiscal event or every forecast, people have questioned whether we would be able to live within that framework. And every time I have delivered within that framework. I've delivered a spending review in that framework. I doubled the headroom against the fiscal rules within that framework. And at the most recent forecast, just 3 weeks ago, we increased the headroom against both of the fiscal rules that we set. Now, yes, there's been volatility in financial markets the last few weeks. Britain is not unique. In that every country has seen its borrowing costs increase as traders are concerned around the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on energy prices that will in turn push up inflation, which in turn could push up interest rates. So it is clear what the source of the shock here, and it is not anything to do with what we have done here at home, but we are in a stronger position to withstand those shocks than we would have been 18 months ago when we had a higher deficit, where we did not have properly funded public services because there had been no spending review despite high levels of inflation for many years. So the approach that I've taken in terms of fiscal consolidation and building that headroom means that we are in a stronger position than we were to withstand those shocks. In terms of the EU, I don't think it is right to say that what we have already agreed will not have an impact on growth. In fact, the impact on growth of the things that we have already announced is bigger than any of the other trade deals that we have secured, because half of our trade is with the EU, and even what we've done on food and farming is significant given the amount of trade that flows between the UK and the EU. So there are a lot more benefits to be had. As I used in my speech today, economists are now suggesting that the hit to our GDP is worth around 8% of GDP. So you can see that making trade and investment flows easier between our countries can begin to get some of that lost growth back again, and ultimately in people's pockets with higher living standards.
Thank you, Chancellor. And can I now invite the President of the University, Sir Anthony Filkenstein, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Hi, Anthony.
Chancellor, thank you very much indeed on behalf of everyone here today. Events like this lecture not only demonstrate Bayes Business School standing in the heart of the City of London, reflected by the presence here of our rector, the Lady Mayor of the City of London, but also the university's wider commitment to research at the frontier of professional practice, exemplified by the work of the Centre for Banking Research, which hosts the Mais Lecture. World events in recent weeks have shown how unsettled the wider landscape remains, with geopolitical tensions that continue to weigh on confidence. Yet moments like this also remind us why institutions like this one matter so profoundly. In challenging times, our commitment to developing thoughtful, resilient leaders takes on even greater purpose and gives us further reason for optimism about the future they will shape. These events don't happen without real effort from real people. Barbara Kazu and the team at Bayes have made this one of the most prestigious platforms in British economic policy, a place where ideas that matter get a proper hearing. Matt Drew and the events team have once again made a complicated event look effortless. We're grateful to all of them. It was a particular pleasure for me to work with Jess Glover from HMT, the Director General for Growth and Productivity, a title that carries some weight when growth and productivity are, as the Chancellor has just reminded us, essentially the whole argument. I should confess that both my sister and elder son have worked at the Treasury. My younger son is there now. So I follow HMT's work with rather more than the usual interest. My advice in passing to the Chancellor is always keep a Finkelstein close at hand. We are, as a family, broadly available, modestly priced. Actually, my son has now become a consultant, so he's less modestly priced. And I think I can say this not entirely without opinions on your policy options. Now, to the lecture itself. When you developed the first Mais Lecture 2 years ago, you were setting out a framework, Securonomics, very much welcomed, the active strategic state, the foundations on which a serious growth agenda could be built. Today, you've had what I think is the harder task of showing how that framework becomes a realizable program, how intention becomes institutionalized, how strategy becomes something that actually changes the incentives facing businesses deciding where to invest. And above all, the task of securing the collective political determination to achieve what is necessary. The national interest principles set out today are an example of a serious attempt at that. The argument that closer alignment with our nearest neighbours and largest trading partners is not a political retreat, but in fact an economic necessity, is one this audience understands instinctively. It is, of course, good to see the other two vertices of the Golden Triangle receive some support. I thought that was funnier than it turns out to be. Diagnosis is relatively easy. The UK has no shortage of elegant diagnoses of its growth problems. The theory of change is where the real intellectual work lies. We are, after all, collectively party to a long British tradition of diagnosing our productivity challenge with great sophistication and then moving on to the next diagnosis. The Chancellor is clearly aware of that tradition. Today, she has made a serious case that this time it is different. This room will test that case, as it should. That's what the Mais Lecture is for. Thank you, Chancellor, for your excellent lecture, for the honour of hosting you, and for the public service that your work entails.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to make this lecture today. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Thank you.